Hey there, welcome to Farmcraft. In this video I am installing a backup generator for my entire system. That's for my house and my shop and basically all the electricity on the farm. After watching this video, I think you'll have a good understanding of how that's done, but this is a more complicated system than standard, so there's some other things in here that you would also learn, like how to do 2 transfer switches at the same time, how to deal with a grid tie solar system, how to wire a 400 amp service into 200 amp panels, and things like that. A lot of good stuff coming up in this video. I did my best to try to keep it simple and understandable. Hopefully I succeeded. Now we're going to go back a few months to when I actually placed the generator on its pad. Then a few more months passes before I do the wiring. You'll see. So here's a literal overview of my system. My power comes in right here. There's power lines and that's a power pole. And it goes to this little outbuilding where the power meter is. The meter is 400 amps and it immediately goes to 2 200 amp panels that act as disconnects. One 200 amp panel goes to my house, the other 200 amp panel goes to my shop. So once they divide at this point here, there's no connection between the house and the shop. Also note that my solar panels, which are a grid tie system, are attached to my shop, and that makes it very difficult to use the solar to then feed a critical load panel all the way back to the house. So the best way to provide backup power to both buildings is to do it right at the meter, which is exactly what we're going to do. This is my incoming power. It comes off the power pole into the meter, and it's 400 amp service. It splits into 2 200 amp panels. This one goes to the house, this one goes to my shop. So I'm going to be putting a generator right here. This will be an automatic power backup. When the grid goes down, the generator will turn on, and my entire system will be powered. This is a 24 kilowatt generator, so is able to handle pretty much anything that I need. Some of you may have seen my solar videos, and you might be wondering why I'm doing a generator. There's good reasons for going with a generator like this, and we'll talk about that later. But let's get this thing unpacked. So you might be wondering how many of these I've installed in the past. The answer is 0. Yeah, no, I've never installed a generator like this, but I've done an awful lot of electrical work, a lot of wiring. I'm going to be able to figure this out. Now, for a lot of people, a backup generator like this is a matter of convenience. This is not for me. This is actually a financial decision. We raise beef cattle, and frequently I'll have 2 or 3 freezers full of beef, worth many thousands of dollars, and I'm not always here. And if the power goes out and I'm not able to crank up a generator and keep those freezers cold, I could potentially lose all that meat. And this generator is going to last for decades. So the insurance of knowing that my freezers are going to stay cold no matter what happens is totally worth it and makes financial sense. Another thing folks don't think about is if you have a well and you don't have electricity, you don't have water. And not only do I need the water, but my cows also need the water. Their water is run off of our well system. So again, if I'm not here and the power goes out, the cows aren't drinking. So this is a big deal. Let me also add, I live in North America and I know North American wiring. Across the pond and in other parts of the world, electrical systems are very different and I don't know very much about them. I do know that much of what I show in this video would not apply in those areas. Well, wouldn't you know it? It's been raining like crazy and it's going to rain more today, but today is the day the inspector scheduled me for. If I don't do it today, I'm going to have to wait like another month. And then it'll probably be raining then too, so we're going to work around it. You can probably tell it's been several months since I placed the generator. The gas company came and hooked up the gas when I wasn't here, so I don't have any footage of that. But today is the big day of wiring. Now I went and got a permit. I've got everything figured out. I've got all my supplies, I hope. And the power company is going to come here shortly. They're going to disconnect my power. I'm going to rip all these panels apart. And I need to get it all back together in time to have it inspected before the day's up. Otherwise, I'm going through the night without power. And it's not exactly warm out. So it wouldn't be the end of the world, but there is kind of some stress and some pressure on me here. Really feeling the need to get this done. Of course, it's got to be a rainy day.
No, ain't that the way it always is. I'm going to open this thing up. Every now and again, these cutouts that are old, sometimes they'll do something stupid. So If you might clear up for me maybe a little bit. Good girl.
What do you mean do something stupid?
These old porcelain cutouts.
Oh, they'll break?
They have a tendency to break sometimes. And when they do,
hit you on the head.
Yeah, when they do, especially on those, they'll come down and lay on something stupid. The ground open. I'll have to replace something and then go back and get the main line on, but we good on those.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's not just that it falls, it's electrical.
Yeah, when the top of it, where it's still hooked up, it would fall and get us. But we good.
So if you see up there, there's a little kind of metal bar. That's actually a fuse. And that is what feeds, the hot line is the top line of the power lines. And that is connected. You can see through the ceramic insulators. Goes through that bar and then down into the transformer. And then these are the 120 volt lines that come down through this conduit and to my meter. So that's all he has to do to disconnect. They take a fiberglass pole, no chance of getting shocked. They just pull that bar and power's off. Nothing for me to worry about down here. They can also turn off your power by pulling the meter out, but that would leave these two lines hot and everything on the top side of this box would still be hot.
All right, buddy.
All right. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, this is the typical residential power setup in North America. It's called a split-phase power system, and coming out of the transformer are two hot lines and a neutral. The voltage between the hot and the neutral is 120 volts, either hot and the neutral. And then the voltage between the two hots is 240 volts. So you have two voltage options in your system. You can power things with 240 volts, and that would be for things like hot water heaters and ranges that need a lot of power. Or you can power things with 120 volts, which is all our electrical outlets, lamps, toasters, all that kind of stuff. You know this is the neutral because it's hooked to this wire right here, and that wire goes down the power pole into a ground rod. That's the ground wire. And it also continues up past that neutral and attaches to this wire, which is the main neutral. So the hot is here, the neutral is here, and then coming out of the transformer, hot, neutral, hot. All right, so let's look at my current setup. This is the main power coming in. 400 amps right there. So these are the two hots coming off of the pole. They attach at these terminals, come across the top, staying separate from each other, and then down through the meter to these terminals. And then splits into 200 amp going this way, and a 200 amp going this way, and of course there's two legs, so 200 amps going that way, 200 amps going that way. So basically the 400 amps comes in, splits into two, and goes to two panels. And this is the neutral, which also splits, one to each panel. This one feeds my house, this one feeds my shop. This orange line here is the line that I used to use as a generator. These were interlocked breakers. Little tab here acted as a block so that both breakers can't be on at the same time. It's either main power or generator power. You can't energize both. If I'd run a generator down at the shop, the power would come back up through this, go into here, and then feed the house. My setup's a little complicated because I'm out here on an outbuilding with my main power coming in, splitting into two 200 amp panels that immediately go to disconnects and then feed the structures. Typically you'd have your meter and it would just go into the house to your main panel and that would be it. But I can't do anything simple. So in this box we have neutral coming in, goes to your neutral bar. We've got two hots coming in here and here, and those energize those strips right there that the breakers plug into. And then these wires then carry that power out of the bottom of the panel and to the house. And your ground, we've got a couple grounds here, but this is the main ground. So right here there's two ground rods down in, obviously, to the ground, and they come up and tie into this ground bar. This is ground going to the house. That one's going over here to ground this box as well. Ground and neutral are tied together at the meter base. Yeah, so what's the plan today? This is going to stay pretty much like it is, and I will have some wires going between the ATSs. So this is going to be replaced with an automatic transfer switch. This is going to be replaced with an automatic transfer switch. And I better get to work, because until I get this done and inspected, I don't have power. So I'm replacing this box with an automatic transfer switch, but it's going to require all the same connections, and I'm going to be reusing these wires. The orange wire that was the generator wire I'm going to turn into a control wire to control the solar, which we'll talk about later. Okay, we are minus one box. So this is the transfer switch. I just need to make holes that will match this. Well, I see a problem. These two connect right there. They're not a problem. And those are the hots. Those are more important, but the ground connects all the way up here and I don't have the length. The neutral, yeah, I can get there. I would rather it came up and down into it, but I can do that. So the ground, I'm gonna have to figure something out. I was pretty worried about this ground wire not reaching. Grounds are the safety net, and code is very particular on how they're done. I don't think it would pass inspection to just extend that wire up with a connector to reach the ground bar. Of course, replacing the wire with a longer one is an option, but that would be an awful lot of work. That wire goes down through the ground all the way to my house, multiple turns. It would be expensive and many hours to replace that wire. And more importantly to me at that moment, it certainly wasn't going to happen that day. And until I pass inspection, remember, no power. These are 4/0 aluminum wires. They are beefy and very hard to bend. Electricians have strong hands. And then this is deox. This prevents oxidation of aluminum conductors where they connect. So these are the load connections in the transfer switch. These are the wires that are going to my house, feeding it power. Yes, that's an actual torque wrench. So here I'm hooking the neutral back up to the meter base. And the other end of that wire to the neutral bar in the transfer switch. Deox again, and I'm torquing everything to 250 inch-pounds. You can see here that the neutral bar and the ground bar are bonded together with that short green wire right above my socket wrench. Here I'm hooking up the copper wire to the ground rods. And here I'm doing the hot wires. Now, the inspector told me he wanted to come inspect at noon, and it is currently 10:15, and I'm kind of getting worried, so gotta get moving. I knew I wasn't going to be done by noon, and I was going to push him off, hoping to be done by around 2. You guys get the idea. I need to turn the camera off and do that one now. Kind of behind schedule here, so yeah, I'll bring you back once I get to something new. Okay, this box is loose. I'm about to take it off. Just note, I'm going to change the way these things, I'm going to shorten this. The whole box is going to move this way, which will just make my wires shorter. That won't be a problem. And this will come up in the other side of the box. And then in this side is where I'm going to tie in to the generator. The generator is going to have a conduit coming over here and then up into this side of the box. Same problem with the ground. That's the inspector calling, and it's 11:40. I told him I might be ready around 2. Honestly, I wasn't expecting quite so much pressure from the inspector. I was hoping I could just have an inspection around 4, but, you know, you have to work around them. When you glue these, make sure you hold them together for a little while, because if you just hold it for a couple of seconds and let go, it'll start pushing itself back out. It'll end up too long. These are the wires that are going to carry power from the generator to the system, and these are number 2 aluminum. This is a 24 kilowatt generator, 100 amp breaker. This is the max that this can carry at a service entrance per code. And I did run this by my inspector first. I already had this wire, otherwise I would have stepped it up just one more, but this will certainly do the trick. Meets code. These are the control wires, just stripping the ends to get ready to hook them up. We'll talk more about these. Starting with the first hot wire here, and then going to the second hot wire. And then green is the ground, and the one with the white stripe is the neutral. And again, these are the generator conductors. These are only going to have power when the generator is running, and this is what feeds back into the system. Yeah, so there's 6 control wires on the Generac system, and I'm just keeping them color-coded, obviously. You've got N1, N2. Those are line 1, line 2 utility sense. Those are the wires that it's using to determine does it need to turn the generator on or not. The T1 VAC load supply, I think that is what it's using for power. Like charging the battery and everything. Then this is 12 volt DC. I think it uses that for doing the transfer switch. There's a battery in here so that it'll never be without power. Black's ground and 23 is the transfer signal. But you don't really need to know what they all do. You just have to keep the colors straight and hook them all up. So you can see I just went white to white, red to red, black to black, yellow, yellow with a black stripe, and then blue. Piece of cake. Then obviously you've got line 1, line 2. Those are your 220 volt lines, neutral and ground. This is the neutral going to my shop. And here I'm starting on the hots that are going to the shop. You can see there's 4 lugs in the bottom of the transfer switch. The 2 in the back and lower are the ones that are going to the load, in other words, going to my shop. And the ones that are a little higher and more forward in the box are the generator incoming power. Here I'm hooking up the generator ground, and next I'll be hooking up the generator neutral. Alright, so I've hooked up my control wires. Same deal. Black to black, yellow with a black stripe, yellow and blue. They just need to go to one transfer switch. I've talked to Generac, I've also talked to an electrician. To control the second transfer switch, you just need to send 12 volts and the 23 transfer signal. So white and red. So I'm taking white and I am twisting them together. And same with the red. You know, this stranded wire is kind of a pain. I don't know if it's necessary for it to be stranded. If I had a choice, I would get solid. multiple times I'm trying to push wires in and the strands hook on something and it won't go, and it's really slowing me down. Okay, these are the two hots from the generator. I need to split them. It needs to go here, and then it needs to go through all the way to the other transfer switch and go there again. So I'm going to use this couple tap, probably another name for these, but basically you put one wire in, tighten it down, and then you can bring two wires out. So now I can run two more hot wires that will tie into the couple taps and bring the generator power over to the second transfer switch. You know, I'm going to have to complain to HR. I haven't had a break, no lunch. Who's running this operation? So I can't take a break, but you guys can. This is some footage from earlier this year. This is a group of calves that was weaned from their moms about 4 months ago. So they haven't seen each other in 4 months. There's the babies. There's the mamas. Mini-Me there is the only one that sees them. She's very interested. Ooh. They butt heads like this sometimes to play, but this is a dominance thing. And for the record, that is not moms and calves doing that. That's moms doing it with someone else's calf. They're kind of like chickens. They got to work it out and figure out what the pecking order is. Alright, I guess they said hello. They're on a brand new field and nobody's eating. Hope you guys enjoyed your break. I'm still over here working. But look at this. I'm hooking up the ground wire to the neutral bar. The inspector told me because we're bonded here, you know, basically neutral and ground are the same in this box, that it's fine for me to hook my ground to the neutral bar. So that is a huge help. Huge help. Honestly, I think I got pretty lucky here, and I'm not sure what I would have done if it hadn't been able to reach the neutral. Any electricians out there? What would the solution be for this? These are the hot wires for the grid connection. These obviously attach in the meter base and then go to the top of the transfer switch. Okay, making my last two big connections. These are those same two grid connections on the other box. They attach here in the meter base and then here in the transfer switch. Check that out. Just passed my inspection. We're gonna have power tonight. That's good news. Okay, I'm going to do my best to explain what's going on here. These things get complicated pretty quickly when you're going beyond what is a normal install. So the first complication is my 400 amp service. That is right here coming in. This is my meter base. That's where the meter plugs in.
and it splits into two 200 amp hots there. One's going here and one's going here, going to this box which feeds my house. The other ones are going to this box which feeds my shop.
On a more typical install, which would be a regular 200 amp service,
you'd have 200 amp lines coming in, they'd attach at the top of the meter, and they'd come out of the bottom and go to your house, go to the main panel of your house. Now, with two transfer switches, you essentially wire one of them up as, you can call it a master. So this is basically my master transfer switch. It is fully wired to the generator, as we saw. It's got all 6 control wires. It's got T1, which is for battery charging, I believe. N1 and N2 are utility sense. Those are only hot when the utility is up, when the grid is up. Even if the grid is down and the generator is on, N1 and N2 will be neutral. They will not have any voltage. 0 is a ground. This is a 12 volt power supply. I believe it's what's used to work the switch when the power goes off, because before the generator kicks on and the grid is down, it has to use the battery in the generator to function. And then this is the signal telling it whether to transfer or not. All you need to do to send to the other switch is the 12 volt power and the transfer signal. And then it will just mimic exactly what this one does. This is the one that's going to be sensing, is the grid up or not, and basically sending the signal to the generator to turn on or turn off, that kind of stuff. So the red and white go over through the control wire, and yeah, this is the control wire right here. You can see back in there I've got the red and the white, and I do have one more thing hooked up.
that's a control wire for my solar system, and we'll get into that later.
So then all of our current carrying, number 2 aluminum coming out of the generator, coming through that conduit there, coming up into here, and it goes into these couple taps right there. And that allows me to split that to go to both transfer switches. So here's the power in, one goes out, goes all the way across to the other transfer switch. The other one goes right here. That's where the generator hooks up. And then same with this one. One's going this way, and this one is going up and hooking there. These connections down behind here are to the load. In other words, these are to what you're trying to power. In this case, this is my shop. So these lines go underground and they come out in the main panel of my shop. Over to this panel, these lines go underground and come out in my house at the main panel. This ground wire is the one that comes out of the box and actually goes down into the ground. There's 2 ground rods there. These are bonded, and obviously I'm bonded here as well, and we're bonded here. Once your power has come out of the meter into a box and it's bonded meaning neutral and ground are hooked together, beyond that everything should be separate. So when this goes into my house, the neutral and ground should be separated. When it goes into my shop, the neutral and ground should be separated. I imagine when I go back to look at this footage, I'm going to wish I had explained something better, but at this point I'm kind of brain dead. This has been a hectic day getting all this ready to go. Let's get the power back on. Power's back on, so this line right here is live and into that is live, but the breaker's off, so the rest of this is still off. I thought you might like to see this. This is actually the switch, and they give you this thing, and that is now in generator mode, and this is in grid mode. That's what happens when the transfer switch actually does the switching. It goes pop, and there's contacts that choose between either these, which are generator, and these, which are grid.
Combining this with my grid tie solar system adds another level of complexity, so let's tackle that now.
Alright, so now I'm going to work on making sure that my solar inverter can never try to generate power into the generator. When the grid's up, this inverter sends power back into this panel and it goes to the grid. But when the grid goes down and the generator kicks on, now there's going to be power at this panel from the generator. And this inverter is going to think well, the power's back on, and it's going to start generating power that doesn't have anywhere to go. And now if I had a battery backup system and a place to dump it and load shedding and all those kind of things, but I don't have it set up like that. So that would be a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put basically an interrupt in between the panel and the inverter in the form of a couple contactors. I'm going to use 2 just so that it's fail safe. So this right here is the solar coming in. So that's from the panels. Right now it's getting dark, so there's like 60 watts being generated. Goes to here, goes into this, and then this is the disconnect. So the DC power stops here and doesn't go up into the inverter. So nothing's coming out of the inverter. So all these are not live anymore. I have a disconnect on the other end of this cable here. I'm going to go throw that disconnect, just so there's no concerns of anything here. I talked to an electrician about this. He agreed with me. I think this is the best way to handle it. I need to make sure that the solar system is always disconnected when the generator is on. What I'm going to use to do that is a contactor. This is basically like a big relay. When you apply 120 volts AC across these leads, it throws the contactor. There's a solenoid in there. Right now, there is no connection between this and this, or this and this. Those are all the same connection right there. Those are all continuous with each other, but there's no connection from this side to this side. And same with this side to this side. So that makes this a double pole because there's 2 separate connections you're dealing with. When you energize the control circuit, which is this, then both this and this get connected as well as this and this. Why is it different than a relay? I don't actually know why they call them different than a relay. It's essentially just a big relay, but I'm actually going to put 2 contactors in there. Now, why am I doing 2? Well, one of the most common ways that these fail is they stick. In other words, right now there's no connection here, but once you apply current, the solenoid throws and this is connected with this. That's how it's going to be 99.9% of the time. When the grid is up, the contactor is going to be thrown and they will be connected. Well, when the grid goes down, it needs to disconnect. If it sticks, I've just lost my failsafe. I no longer have my solar system isolated from my generator, and that could be a real problem. I hope the inverter would see an overvoltage and shut down. I hope the generator would see it and do the same thing, but I don't want to rely on that. That could also damage computers. I mean, that could be a real mess if that happens. So just because sticking is a real issue that can happen, I've got 2 of them. So my line's going to come in, it's going to go through here, it's going to go to here and out here. Both of them would have to stick in order for this to fail. So it just adds another level of security that there's no way for the solar system to ever see the generator and try to feed power into it. Let's get it wired up. And I want it mounted somewhere in here. I rerouted this wire just to get it out of my way. Sometimes you need that after a long day. The neutral and ground can just pass through and hook up just like they were before. And these are copper wires, so deox is not necessary. For the record, I probably could have used single pole relays and just switched one of the hot lines going to the inverter. It's certainly not going to continue generating if it loses one line, but the cost was basically the same. So there's something else I want to do here, is ground the box. I did not want to cut that wire because that's a big wire and I don't have a wire nut or a good way to connect it and send the ground on. This way I'm going straight from my panel to the solar inverter with an uninterrupted wire, so I know the ground is good. So I just need to run a second wire that I'm going to come down and hook on right there and ground that box. Okay. So now I just need a control wire to throw the solenoid and control the contactors. So this orange wire is my generator wire. You already saw this when I was wiring in the transfer switches, and I'm going to use this as a control wire. You know how there's some tools you just smile when you grab? This is one of them. I fought with cheap connector crimpers for years, and then I got this one, which isn't that expensive. It's in my Amazon store, and man, this thing, it always works. These things are always tight. If you do any crimp connectors and you don't have a good tool, get this. Okay, so that one is hooked up. Now all I need to do is just parallel. So I've got another connection on each, so I'll just bring that one over to here, that one over to here, or you could do either way, it doesn't matter. It's alternating current, there's no polarity. Okay. So now I'm just wiring this back up exactly how it was, using the same wire nuts and everything. Everybody always loves it when I use wire nuts. These things sure seem to work, and I wouldn't be opposed to buying something better, but I have so many wire nuts, I will never use them all. And to go buy something different and then what, throw these things away? I'm just not going to do it. So now how are we going to control these contactors? Let's head back over to the transfer switch before I put the covers on. So this is the power supply for my contactor to disconnect my solar. Recall the contactors need power to be connected. So N1 is the utility sense. That's only going to have power when the grid is up. So I'm using that as a power supply to close the contactor. And it comes over and it goes to this switch here. This is an auxiliary switch that comes with the transfer switch for purposes exactly like this. It allows you to control something else depending on what mode the transfer switch is in. When it's in grid mode, this switch is closed. When it's in generator mode, this switch is open. And that switch is normally closed, and then that goes down and that goes all the way to my shop. Then coming back is the neutral, and I just take that to the neutral bar here. So that completes the circuit. Why do you need this switch? Well, because there's a timer. You don't want to just trust if the grid is up, the solar should be on. If the grid is down, the solar shouldn't. Say the grid goes down, the generator fires up, and the solar is turned off. Well, now the grid comes back up. This wire is going to immediately be energized, but the generator is still going to be on, and the transfer switch is still going to be in generator mode. It's not going to immediately flip back. What it's going to do is it's got a timer, and it's going to detect, is the grid voltage stable? Is it, flickering? Is it going to go on and off? And if that's the case, it's just going to stay in generator mode until the grid voltage is stable. So there's a timer there before it's going to switch off of generator and back to grid mode. But this wire would be energized and the contactors would close, except for the switch right here. This will be open when it's in generator mode. It will not allow voltage to get back to my contactors until the switch actually is thrown into grid mode. Clear as mud. All right, took my meter, verified everything. The contactors are working. So let's get everything closed up on this generator and fire it up. Let's see what this thing can do. Okay, we're going to try our first start of this thing. I've checked the oil, and of course, it's never run before, so there's probably air in the lines. It's probably going to take a little while, but you just hit this button here. It says manual. Boy, it's close. Come on, baby. Oh, you were there. Error code. Don't like that. Okay, so let's do a load test. Now, all you have to do to test it is turn the grid power off on the panel that controls the generator. This is the one that has the sensing lines, the control wires, and everything. So if I flip that off, the generator is going to see the power just went out, and it's going to start up. It's going to start generating power. Once the transfer switch sees that it has good power on the generator side, it is then going to switch and send the transfer signal, which will switch this one simultaneously regardless of what position this one's in. So that's very good for my solar disconnect. There's no way to like screw it up here. If I only turn this one off, well, that would cut power to my house, but the generator would not turn on because the generator is going to see that the grid's still there and nothing would happen. So if I turn just one off, it's not going to mess with my solar system. If I turn that one off, that's going to load test. It's going to switch both transfer switches and turn everything over to generator power. So let's do that. Let me point something out here first to avoid confusion. See this light back here? Well, that's my house, and it's getting power from this panel, which I do not shut off. That's why the light stays on even when I throw this breaker. But if you watch closely, when the transfer switches change, you can see the light flicker in response. And I've got the panels off so you can actually see the switch get thrown. All right, so the grid just went down, and it's going to get loud, so I'll shut up. So both the house and shop are on generator power now. To really give it a test, I went over to my wood shop and I ran some boards through the wide belt sander. It can use a sustained 30 amps, and its startup amperage is like 50 amps. And the generator did just fine. So now I'm going to flip the breaker back on, so as far as the generator is concerned, the grid's just now coming back up. The transfer switch will sense that and transfer the power back to the grid. The generator will run for a little while longer in cool down mode and then shut itself off. And there, we just changed back to the grid. So I got to tell you, my contactor setup works fine. That's the important part, but it makes a lot of noise. I don't know if you can hear that. I mean, that's an obnoxious buzzing. and basically whenever the grid is on, it's going to be making that noise, which always kind of annoys me because I feel like I'm wasting electricity when I can hear it humming. 0.08 amps. Wonder how much that costs me a year. It actually comes out to $9 a year. Not that that's a ton of money, but still, that's kind of annoying. Seems like a waste. So I'm kind of not thrilled with this setup, and I need to brainstorm how maybe I could set this up better. If anyone has any ideas and wants to leave them in the comments. Well, if it's a good idea, I'll appreciate it. If it's a crappy idea, I won't. How's that? All right, I figured it out, but it's worth explaining a little more about contactors. The quick and obvious answer is have a normally closed contactor there. Normally closed meaning that the circuit is going to be powered without any power on the control wire. But then the problem is, how do you control it? But I've come up with an answer, but let me explain a little bit more about contactors. What I have in mind now is a double pole, single throw contactor. Double pole means basically it's got two sets of connections that it's managing. This is the control circuit. So there's a coil there, a solenoid, that either these switches are either in this position or they're in this position. So when there's no power on the control circuit, it is opened. So it's normally opened, and it's double pole, meaning there's two sets of connections. For clarity, this would be a single pole, single throw. Same thing, control circuit, but there's just one switch and one wire coming through. These double pole single throw relays are very common, and they were like, I think 12 bucks. Really cheap, used all the time in HVAC and things like that. And these are the normally open type. They do make a normally closed type, but those are harder to find, they're more expensive. In my searching, compared to finding a normally closed contactor, a double pole, double throw contactor is actually cheaper and will accomplish the same thing. Double pole, double throw is very similar, but it adds a lot of functionality to it. Same thing with a control circuit. There's two poles, there's two switches, and there's two incoming inputs on the bottom. No differences there. The only difference is you've added a second set of contacts so that when there's no power on the control circuit and it's in this position, you have two options. You have a normally open circuit right here, and you have a normally closed circuit right there. And you don't have to hook up all the wires. You can use what you want on this. And these are quite common and not terribly expensive. So basically, I'm going to connect now to the normally closed circuit. It will automatically be connected. I'm still going to use two contactors for extra redundancy. But the question is, how do you control it? And I had the eureka moment. It's really easy. It's really easy. All I have to do is hook this to the generator power. So if the generator ever turns on and starts producing a voltage, that voltage is going to come to the control circuit and it's going to throw the relay. So it's going to open this circuit here. I'm not going to have anything connected to this one. I don't need it. I'm basically using this as a normally closed contactor. So there won't be any power on it 99.9% of the time. When the generator turns on, it's going to cause the contactor to open. And that's it. That's all I need. I found a couple of these. They're like 25 bucks a piece. Not super cheap, but worth it in the long run. And kind of wish that's what I had gotten from the beginning. Look at that nice green light. Having that there is very comforting, I guess is the word. Being out in the country, losing power is a little worse for us. No electricity means no water. Up until now, whenever the power went out, everything was very manual. I had to get out a generator, hook everything up, make sure all the freezers and refrigerators were, load shed, had to turn things off like the hot water heater. And now I don't have to do anything. I just have to look at a green light. Love it. Hey, look. This is known in the state of cancer to cause California. So some of you hardcore longtime viewers are going to know that I used to have a battery backup inverter and battery bank over here to allow my system to essentially function off-grid. I'm sure the question is in your mind, what happened? What happened was money and complexity. Now, one of the issues, the way my system is that you now see, my power comes in on a different building and then it comes down here. My solar is on this building. And trying to make it so that it can automatically change over from here and power the house, very difficult to do. The problem with the solar system is it can't run everything that I have. The battery bank has limited capacity. The inverter has limited capacity. That generator can generate a lot more and put out a lot more than my battery bank and inverter could do. So put all that together, this is a much more convenient and, more importantly, automatic system. Now, could I make a solar system automatic? Yes, but it would cost significantly more. And then the solar system with the battery bank that I have could not run my entire system. I have to load manage if I'm going to use that. I have to turn the hot water heater off. I have to turn the air conditioner off. You know, whatever the big loads are, I'm going to have to shut them down for that system to not get overloaded. That's one thing I didn't like about it. But the other thing I realized after I installed it, many months went by and I never used the batteries, not even once. And I did some math. At that time, I think it came out to the battery bank cost about $3,000. And with the amount of time that I would really need it, that I couldn't get by with just a little portable generator, it was going to cost me somewhere in the range of $1,000 to $2,000 per outage for those batteries. And that's just absurd. That's a dumb financial decision. So what did I do? I put my batteries into storage. I dumped the battery acid out. I put it into containers that I could store the acid in. I rinsed them very well multiple times with distilled water. I flipped them upside down. I let them dry out. So those are now in dry storage, and lead acid batteries can stay like that for decades and be just as good as the day you dried them out. So if I ever want to use these batteries again, all I gotta do is flip them over, pour the battery acid back in, and they're good to go. They were charged when I drained them, so they will be charged when I fill them. So I still have everything, and I can hook it back up, but it didn't make sense for me to keep a battery bank here because it only lasts 5 years. When 5 years goes by, I'm going to now have to spend, gosh, it's probably more like $4,000 now to replace my battery bank that I really needed once or twice. Well, $4,000, I spent like, it's probably gone up now because of all the inflation, but I spent around, I think, $5,200 for that generator. It just didn't make sense to do this. If I ever get a prolonged outage, if the power's going to be out for 2 weeks or a month, yeah, I'm going to hook this back up because the advantage here is I can use my solar panels, I can charge these up and keep my system running in an off-grid capacity and not run out of propane.
Now, I know that's enough yakking for you. I'm tired of hearing myself talk. All right, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.